Hey everyone, how's it going? So my name is Marek, and today we're going to be talking about MoFi, which is all about how to make mobile-first DeFi applications. So if you end up liking this talk and have any questions afterwards, definitely find me outside. I'm going to be right over there. But you can also find me on Twitter at Marek_. Happy to answer questions online as well. So I wanted to start by reflecting a little bit about the current state of DeFi today. And I came across this screenshot online, and I think it summarizes things pretty well. Right? DeFi today has become really incredibly powerful. We have these really great protocols and amazing interfaces to these dapps that have been deployed over the last couple of years. People have used these to deploy billions and billions of dollars in TVL to a lot of these smart contracts. It's all extremely exciting, but it's definitely something that requires kind of a bigger screen. And if you look at this, it's hard not to think that this was probably most likely predominantly developed with a desktop or a laptop screen in mind. And many other dapps are very similar. Now, this and many of those are also fully mobile responsive, and so that's really exciting, and I think these folks should get a lot of credit for all of that hard work, but it's really hard to imagine that these applications were built with mobile first in mind and then scaled up to desktop. Most likely, the desktop applications were built first, and then these products were likely made to fit in a responsive manner on mobile devices. Now, there's nothing wrong with this, of course. I think this is servicing us really well. MetaMask, I think the extension browser is one of the most common wallets that people are using. I think they recently announced that they surpassed 5 million monthly active users. That's really exciting. Know that number is going to keep growing. Maybe in the next couple of years we'll hit 100 million monthly active users. But one thing that I'm curious about, one thing that I'm thinking about personally, is how do we get to the first 1 billion users? Will this approach work for those users? And I hypothesize that the answer is no, and the way to do so is, in fact, not surprisingly, with mobile DeFi. Now, so to help argue my case, I have a few points I wanted to cover. And I really hope that by the end of this talk, I'll be able to convince you that you, as DeFi dApp developers, should be building the next generation of dApps in a fully mobile-first way. Ideally, not just as web apps, but ideally starting off by building actual native mobile applications as the very first interface that you think about and that you create when developing for your users. I'm going to start with the most obvious point, which is if you're going to try to get the next generation of DeFi users, meeting them where there's the most of them is clearly a great strategy. And there are a lot of users and a lot of mobile devices out there. I think this comes as no surprise, but just how big these numbers are might come as a surprise. So this is a graph from the Ericsson Mobility Report from this year. As of the end of 2019, there are now 8 billion mobile devices with active mobile subscriptions in the world. These are legit mobile devices, either mobile phones or tablets. This is not counting IoT devices. And that is a staggering number. And perhaps more impressively, as of the end of last year, 6 billion of those are smartphone devices. A lot of people think that there's still a ton of feature phones out there. There are 2 billion active feature phones out there, but there are 6 billion active smartphones out there. That is just a very, very huge number. Next up, people frequently ask me about connectivity. You know, how good is connectivity worldwide? This graph also shows a little bit of that. And generally, the answer is pretty good. Certainly better than what I personally experienced at the FetDAO party on Tuesday. I don't know if you guys also got a lot of 2G that night. I haven't seen 2G on my phone in a very, very long time. And if you look in this graph, it is shrinking worldwide as well. In fact, in 4 years' time, Ericsson is projecting that there will be less than 10% of all global bandwidth worldwide will be 2G. So 90+% will be 3G or better in 4 years. And that's really exciting. So my second reason is a little surprising at first, maybe even counterintuitive. And that's that building for mobile devices, building for devices that are actually constrained, can actually lead to better outcomes. And this is an idea that Luke Wróbelski has talked about at length. Luke is a former director of product management at Google. And he wrote about this topic extensively in a book called Mobile First. He kind of published this about 10 years ago, back when the Web 2.0 world was really taking a close look at mobile and thinking about how they would make their transition. Now, I highly recommend this book. Even though it's 10 years old, it is still very, very relevant. And there's a number of really interesting insights in the book. And one of those insights is that small screens actually force designers and product managers to really focus on what's important. When you have very little space, you have to be quite intentional about what you're going to put in that space. And so Luke talks about doing away with navigation, doing away with Chrome and sidebars and all of the things that you've now come to not expect on your mobile applications because ultimately that is not adding as much value as the underlying content that a lot of these application developers are trying to get in front of you. And so that's really good. The other thing is, network speeds, while they are improving, they are still lower than what you experience on desktop and laptop devices. And this forces you to actually build experiences that can work in those low connectivity environments, which then translates to much better applications when presented with higher speed connectivity. And so your desktop applications suddenly start running extremely quickly simply because you thought about making it work well on a mobile device. The next insight is a little interesting. And if you think about how you use mobile devices, you're always doing so in a much more intimate setting than your desktop and mobile devices or your notebook devices. Frequently, you're on a couch. You might be holding it with one hand. You might be on the toilet. I think there was a study that said that 60% of people use their mobile devices on their toilet. I think that shows something really important about us in society, which is that 40% of people lie. And this kind of one-handed use in these very intimate settings where you're really devoting much less attention to kind of these products really forces us as product managers and designers to really think hard and innovate about and think differently about our users and really innovate to present really great and compelling products for them. And so ultimately, for all of these reasons, Luke argues that if you start by thinking about the mobile device as the first device that you want to target, you ultimately end up building a better product that when you scale it up to desktop will ultimately be better than the product that you would have created if you were building for desktop from the first place. Another point that Luke talks about is around capabilities. Mobile phones have a lot of capabilities that desktops and laptop devices do not have. beyond the obvious GPS and accelerometer sensors, these are things that certainly there are many applications out there that can benefit from them, and maybe DeFi can as well one day. But there's a lot of other things that mobile phones can provide that can be quite useful for DeFi applications. The first is push notifications. If you have a position that's about to get liquidated because the price of something is falling, a push notification is definitely very, very useful. And this is certainly something that mobile phones offer that can be harder to replicate on desktop devices. And then the second one is contact lists. So Vitalik yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw his talk, he was talking about what he envisions will be interesting beyond DeFi. And one of the things he talked about is decentralized social networks. He's particularly excited by them. I'm equally excited. And what better way to build decentralized social networks than to piggyback off of what I think is the biggest distributed social network in the world today, which is this amalgamation of all of those 6 billion smartphone contact lists. It creates one massive distributed and decentralized social network that we can tap into if we're building native mobile applications that can optionally have access to these contact lists. WhatsApp is a great example of a company that used this to great effect to bootstrap their social graph really, really quickly. My next point is about security. This one may be a little more controversial, but I still think it stands. I would argue that smartphones are much better at storing keys than your desktop counterparts. Now, obviously, hardware wallets are the gold standard. They're exceptional. I'm not talking about hardware wallets. If I had the choice between storing a key on my phone or in a hot wallet on a desktop computer, I would certainly be much more comfortable with doing so on my phone. And the reason is these devices now have secure enclaves or trusted execution environments, depending if you're talking about iOS or Android. These are special zones either in the main CPU or in a second CPU on the device that allow you to execute operations that even if your phone was compromised, an attacker wouldn't be able to execute without your permission. And so this is really exciting, and it's a great way of storing keys. In fact, Anchorage, which is a custodial product, only lets you sign transactions with iPhone devices. They don't support any other mechanism. This is because they really, really trust these secure enclaves. They think that they are by far one of the most secure ways of securing key material out there. My next point is about censorship resistant. This is one of the most exciting reasons I like mobile devices. And this is because you can actually build apps that run actual blockchain clients in them. So, of course, not full nodes. Full nodes require a lot of bandwidth, a lot of compute. Mobile devices tend not to be able to provide that. But we do have these things called like clients. After all, Satoshi, to her credit, invented SPV back in the day. It was described in the original Bitcoin white paper. Effectively, the modern-day like client. It's a real big shame that most DeFi applications aren't actually using like clients in order to access the underlying blockchain. Instead, they connect to the chain using trusted third-party nodes, folks like Infura and other node operators. I think these nodes serve a purpose, but it is a real shame that the current state of DeFi requires them. It really opens up DeFi users to censorship and to surveillance. And of course, that's very antithetical to a lot of what we're trying to build in the decentralized ecosystem. Now, of course, the reason for this is because SPV isn't actually that light. On Ethereum, if you wanted to download all of the headers since the beginning of the network, you would download 6 gigabytes of data. That is way too much data for you to download on a mobile device. And that is primarily likely the reason why we are where we are. But the situation is improving. So there are now a number of Snark-based like clients that are being brought to market through a number of kind of new and innovative platforms. Mina and Celo come to mind. Both use Snarks to optimize their like clients. They both use slightly different techniques, but ultimately what they let you do is download a header and then a very small Snark proof that you can verify quickly and non-interactively, effectively proving that the header that you've downloaded is part of the chain. And that's great, but it's very difficult to do that in a web application. It's just very difficult to connect to the P2P network directly from a web app. But on mobile devices, you can totally do it. But if you build a native mobile app, I should say, you can totally do it. And finally, I wanted to kind of touch upon just a few bonus features that may not benefit DeFi developers directly, but if DeFi developers adopt mobile devices as their primary target, it will benefit the broader ecosystem. And so these are the following three. The first one is around scalability through full node incentives. The second one is around Snark proofs. And the third is bridges. I'm just going to quickly jump into the scalability one. Vitalik wrote this really great article a few weeks ago where he talked about why, he wants to scale blockchains kind of horizontally rather than vertically, right? Getting more computers to participate in consensus through sharding rather than increasing the sizes of these machines that are ultimately executing these transactions. And as you can imagine, many of his arguments really focused around decentralization. He fears that if we increase the machine requirements, then we're going to be limiting the ability for kind of a casual user to spin up a full node on their laptop and kind of let it sync in the background while they're doing some other work. And if we limit that, then we're going to be dramatically reducing their ability to kind of verify what the state of the chain and what miners are telling us is in fact the case or is in fact real in the blockchain, ultimately limiting the amount of decentralization in the network. Now, I think these are really, really great arguments, but I think these are stronger in a world where full nodes are not incentivized to be operated. In a world where you could pay full nodes, where you could incentivize them, you can create a situation where a lot of full nodes can be paid at the protocol level to run and verify the work of miners or validators. And by being paid, they can cover the cost of kind of increased machine costs, allowing the network to scale a little more vertically than it would otherwise. And one very easy way to incentivize full nodes is to have like clients pay those full nodes for servicing them. And so in a way, if you have this model where you have a lot of DeFi apps that are built as native mobile applications that are using like clients, they can create this outer circle here. They can communicate with the network using full nodes that are incentivized to operate, that are then connecting those like clients to the validators, ultimately securing the network. And in a world where you have billions of users, not 5 million users, it's not hard to see how this can create a lot of incentive for a lot of full nodes to operate. I think at its peak, Ethereum had 4,000 full nodes, according to ethernodes.org. It's not hard to imagine a world where you can do much better than that while still having full nodes run by professionals in data centers on beefy machines, allowing you to process a very large number of transactions per second. So that's exciting. I mentioned snark proofs earlier. Snark proofs are really, really exciting to me as well. And having the ability to compose these proofs directly with proofs that a header is valid, I think opens up a lot of really interesting applications. Yesterday, Vitalik talked about private attestations. I think that's a really great idea, and one where if you can construct an attestation that is paired with a proof about a header, then you can construct attestations that reference data on chain that can be verified by someone without access to the chain at all. And that's extremely, extremely powerful. Offline transactions are also really useful. If I make a transaction online and then if I go somewhere and try to prove to someone in a fully offline manner that the transaction happened, it's much easier to do that if I have a very, very efficient like client that can be verified non-interactively. And then finally, like clients are just really, really helpful when creating trustless bridges between chains. So now I wanted to transition to kind of the second part of this talk, which is to focus on some interesting MoFi applications in action. One example of MoFi is Valora. So Valora, if you're not familiar with it, is a global Venmo or Cash App, if you're familiar with Cash App. It's built entirely on crypto rails. And taking a page out of Luke's playbook, the app is really optimized for a small screen. And so navigation is hidden away behind a hamburger to save space so that you have a lot of space to focus on your activity feed. We do this because we really want to emphasize that this wallet is for transacting and not just for storing value and investing. This is a kind of a mobile wallet that you transact with on a day-to-day basis. And so the three most important actions are at the bottom so that you can easily access them with one hand, with your thumb. You have send, you have request if you want to request payment from someone, and of course for in-person transactions, there's a QR code button as well. Now, Valora can connect to the blockchain in a fully decentralized way. It connects to the P2P network using Celo's like client, and this works even on resource-constrained devices, in large part because Valora is implemented as a native mobile application. And so it connects in a permissionless, trustless manner to the network. So you don't have to trust a full node in the back end. And this also creates that really nice demand for those full nodes so that we can scale the network with a lot of full nodes to ensure a lot of decentralization. Now, we also work really, really hard to make it secure. So the app uses the secure enclave and the trusted execution environment. Not just for storing keys to sign transactions, but also for what we call data encryption keys. When sending a transaction between two parties, the app will encrypt metadata between the two parties. And the way this works is the app creates a new private-public key pair when you sign up. It uploads the public key on-chain so that anyone can discover it. And from then on, parties can encrypt data off-chain using one of these keys so that only both parties in a transaction can decrypt that data. So this is stored off-chain, and it allows for some really great bits of data to be shared. If you wanted to have this transaction feed with this nice avatar photo and your name and a nice comment tied to the transaction, all of that is encrypted using this data encryption key, stored off-chain and referenced by the transaction hash by only those two parties. And then I think perhaps most importantly, Valora is designed to really take advantage of your existing social network, namely your contact list on your phone, so that you can transact with people simply by searching for their name in your contact list instead of looking up their wallet or trying to figure out what their ENS ID is. So this is not Vitalik's phone number. So if you're texting him right now, you will be disappointed. But the point still stands. You can simply type in the name of someone in your contact list, and it's incredibly easy to find them by phone number. Valora has a decentralized phone verification protocol that it uses when onboarding users, allowing you to find people, again, by phone number, which then allows you to find people by name in your contact list. And what's really, really cool about this is that it actually works even before the recipient has signed up. And so in the case that Vitalik isn't yet on Valora, you can send them a payment. That payment gets stored in an escrow smart contract, and Valora will automatically redeem those funds from that smart contract as part of onboarding once the app completes the decentralized phone verification. It's really, really exciting. And finally, just as a little aside, as of last week, the team worked really, really, really hard to add Celo Euro support, which hopefully is exciting for some of the folks here in this part of the world. And the team is also actively working on adding Celo Euro cash-in, cash-out support, which is going to launch next week. And so if you're interested in playing around with this, I highly recommend checking it out. You can find it at valoraapp.com. And so Valora is a wallet, of course, but DeFi dapps are more than just wallets. They are primarily dapps, and so with the intention of trying to convince you that you should be building your dapps as native apps, I wanted to show you just one more example, which in this case is Impact Market. So Impact Market is a UBI program. It lets you find communities that you want to donate funds to, and then folks in those communities can sign up, and then with the tap of a button, redeem some funds once a day. So Impact Market is running right now in 100 communities across the world. They have close to 20,000 beneficiaries, and they're each redeeming on the order of 50 cents a day, which is really exciting. And so to end, I wanted to just share a story about Manuel. I'm going to call him Manuel, even though that's not his real name, just to preserve his privacy. Manuel lives in Lauro de Freitas in Brazil. This is a favela community in Brazil. And Impact Market went there and started onboarding users. He heard about it from his friend. He had a smartphone, so he was excited. He attended the group onboarding session, which looks like this. And he was introduced to both Valora and the Impact Market apps. He installed both of them on his mobile device and started receiving, again, 50 cents a day on his mobile phone. So at first, he didn't really know what this was. He didn't really trust it. Not surprisingly, he would go to the community organizer every day and cash out instantly. But over time, he realized that, that was relatively easy to do when he needed to do it. And he started trusting that it could happen whenever he needed to do it. So he started holding on to his balance a little longer. This changed even more when Valora introduced savings-like rewards, which effectively incentivized him to hold a balance in his wallet, making him hold his balance for as long as he could before he needed to go buy some groceries, and he would go and cash out then. Once other folks in his community heard about this, they started getting excited too, and so merchants in his community started getting interested in these rewards as well. So they ended up jumping on the bandwagon and started accepting Celo dollars as well. And so it wasn't long before Manuel could actually go to his local kind of corner store and transact directly on the blockchain in order to make his purchases. This grew even more, and the entire kind of favela community of Laura de Freitas started using this. The funds started circulating within these communities. People got excited. They painted a mural. They even talked about creating a fair where every transaction in town was supposed to be on Valora for an entire weekend. COVID put a damper on that, but the excitement is definitely there. And it's just so amazing to see real transactions happening on the chain in this kind of medium exchange manner. So that's the end of the talk. Yeah, just wanted to thank you, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Is there any question?
Hi. So I just downloaded the app, and it has the savings account already done. How does it work without the existing like Ethereum-based DeFi environment? How do you do that right now?
Yeah, so Celo is fully EVM compatible, and there's a number of DeFi applications that have launched on the platform. There's a lending market called Moola, there's an exchange called Ubeswap, and a growing list of various different DeFi applications. We're currently in the process of launching a bridge to Ethereum. You may have heard of James's Presswitch's talk this week, where he was talking about optics. Optics is a really new and interesting technology that allows trust-minimized bridging between EVM-compatible chains. And so as soon as that's launched, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be bridging liquidity, and there's a number of Ethereum DeFi applications that are excited by this and have kind of committed to coming onto Celo to, as they kind of continue their multi-chain expansion. And so the way to think about this is Celo is really part of the Ethereum ecosystem. It's EVM compatible, and it's going to be part of this internet of EVMs that will continue to flourish as more and more EVM compatible chains launch.
That's nice, thank you. I have a second question. What about the fees then? Because like Ethereum mainnet doesn't scale that well. What about Celo?
Yeah, fees, it's a really great question. So from the start, we implemented EIP 1559. Obviously very excited that it's launching on Ethereum soon as well. And the other thing that we've done that I think is quite unique is we've made it possible to pay for fees using ERC20-like contracts. So the Celo dollar and the Celo euro are implemented as tokens on the platform, but yet you can still use them to pay for transaction fees. And so that's another really amazing thing. If you want to send Celo euros to your friend, to a friend's phone number, you can pay for that transaction fee directly in the asset that you're sending, which from a usability perspective is just really, really quite elegant.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's it. No one wants to ask another question?
Do you want to share anything else about what's coming up next for Celo, what you're excited about?
Sure. Yeah, so I think we're very excited about mobile payments, as you can see. One of the really exciting things that actually was announced this week was that PayU is actively working and integrating with the Celo blockchain right now to make it possible to use Celo dollars and the Celo euro to transact with their 500,000 global merchants. So PayU, if you're not familiar with them, they are a Stripe-like PSP, and this is the first time that a PSP of that size is integrating with a blockchain in order to actually process payments on-chain for their merchants. Stripe definitely had to go with Bitcoin for a while, but they ended up rolling that back. And so we're just very, very excited about that. Earlier this year, I bought flowers for my mom for Mother's Day, and I noticed that PayU process the transaction. So super excited for next year, where I'll be able to buy flowers with Valora using Celo dollars or Celo euros directly for my mom.
Great. Anyone else? I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.